Hi, and welcome to the Strategic Targeting Podcast. Now, this is the show where we take a step back from the day-to-day tactical work that we do and try to think strategically about some important issues. Now, there's no one that's listening to this podcast now that doesn't know that the data is the lifeblood of their business, and it's really important. But our guest today is going to talk to us about a new way to think about that. And the question is, are you buying your data too soon? It's Greg Holmes. We'll be back to talk to him right after this. Greg, thanks for joining me. You're Chief Revenue Officer for Xactus, and you brought something to my attention I hadn't even thought about before. Tell us about this strategic imperative you're thinking about.
Yeah, Rick, thanks for having me. We've taken an approach here at Xactus on having lenders step back and really take a look at process in operating in the down market. And obviously, the last 2 to 3 years have been very tough for the mortgage industry. And as we've right-sized the business, we've had to take an approach to help lenders get more efficient in how they operate their business. And data cost has been first and foremost, just due to recent cost structures that have gone up exponentially over the past 2 or 3 years. It's really put a lot of pressure on businesses and how they operate financially. So what we've done is we've said, hey, let's look at start to finish what's being used, and let's reevaluate and make sure that people are using the right products at the right time and place. You take that process, and then you also look at what's out in the market. And just because it's worked historically doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work today, but it means that what you may want to look at is, do you actually need what you're ordering in the process in which you're following? So it's more about a level set and regrouping based on new products in the market, where the market is, and just absolutely making sure we have products in the right time and place in the mortgage lending process.
I love this, Greg. And you're talking about things that I had never really thought about before, but I want to drill in and make sure I know exactly what you mean. Because I know you've got a long history in our industry. You've done a lot of work with credit data, consumer credit data. What specifically are we talking about here in terms of the data that lenders are buying?
Well, specifically here at Xactus, we are one of the leaders in the tri-merge mortgage space. So being in that position, we have a lot of visibility into a lot of shops. One size doesn't fit all when it comes to data and how it's applied. So I'll use an example. You know, historically in mortgage lending, a tri-merge credit report is typically what's used. So we've encouraged lenders to step back and say, you know, maybe we start with a single bureau file as opposed to going to all three. Now, typically a three bureau merge file is needed, but because of the investment in what a tri-merge actually causes, the investment and the cost of the tri-merge has gotten so high that maybe we need to ease into it. So what we've done here at Xactus is we've created technology that allows a lender to set a score threshold. And let's say that score threshold is a 580 credit score. Well, if the rest of the bureaus are below, 580, and you start with one, you may or may not need to pay that $75 or $100 for a tri-merge, when you probably can get the decision that you need with just a single bureau. The automation that I previously mentioned would auto flow and allow for the tri-merge to come through. Let's say if the score is above a 580, but below a 580, maybe it stops at one, lets the lender pause and say, wait, before I invest in this more expensive product, I might be good with just one, which will help keep costs down, which is something that's very important to lenders right now as they operate their business.
Absolutely, Greg. And that was going to be my next question. Why now? But it seems obvious to me. Lenders are looking for every possible way to trim those expenses. And that's very interesting. Now, what's the risk? Talk to us about the risks of not thinking differently, because many lenders, they get into a process, they've used it for years, it's always the same. And what you're talking about kind of upends that a little bit, right?
Yeah, it does. And, this marketplace has really put a lot of emphasis, obviously, on cost. And so, from an impact standpoint, obviously, there's a financial impact to lenders who are operating their business, but also we need to take into consideration consumers, the fees that are passed to them. And there's a lot of talk and communication on the market right now from a legislative standpoint on really making sure that that consumers are passed the right fee, that they're being treated fairly. So by not paying attention to this, it does impact consumers, which gets others involved. That obviously we don't want to negatively impact the consumer, and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So I think it's really about putting the consumer first and what's right for them to keep closing costs down. Operational costs for lenders get passed to consumers at the end of the day. So what we're trying to do is help the consumer and help the lender at one time by revisiting this process so that they're running as efficiently as possible. So you've got both sides. You got the lender trying to operate their business and maximize, what they can do, and then on the other side is also trying to make sure we're doing the right thing for the consumer and the legislative efforts that are out there to focus on fee structures that are part of the lending process.
Well, that's a great point, Greg. I hadn't really thought about the compliance angle, but in this environment, yeah, the government is watching very closely how we're treating consumers. Um, and CFPB has even said some scary things about some of the fees that we've been traditionally always charged, but now are under scrutiny. But tell me about the upside for lenders as they start thinking strategically about these expenses. What are you seeing among the people that you're working with that are the upside benefits of this?
Yeah, I think it's a strategy as we move from this market to the next. Hopefully here in the next several months or quarters, that we'll start to have some tailwinds in this space. And as we do, scalability is going to be very important. Just throwing bodies at the problem is obviously going to increase operational cost. But if we're smart and strategic about our planning, and we move into a busier market where there's more refi activity, so lenders can produce more, then it's a win-win. It helps keep costs where they're at a manageable amount. We don't want to go back to where we were 3 or 4 years ago. We've learned a lot going through this recent market cycle that have really forced lenders to make a lot of changes. But we don't want to unwind those changes if they're working appropriately, and we want lenders to be able to scale, still be able to serve their consumers, operate efficiently, and then really enjoy the economies of scale that don't just simply cost more. It allows them to produce more without the incremental costs being parallel to the other side of the fence. But we've worked real hard with lenders, to take a look at what they're dealing with today, but we really want to prep for tomorrow as we hope more volume comes in, more loans are being closed, we're able to put more consumers into homes, and being able to do it without it just being more increased costs again that gets passed to the consumer, because that's not the ultimate goal. It's about helping lenders operate again efficiently, and then also maintaining and help keep costs low for the consumer.
Absolutely. We've been visiting with Greg Holmes. He's the Chief Revenue Officer of Xactus. Greg, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.